And so, let's see, I'm losing myself here.
So you're with Mr.
Well,
Wright.
yes, we're with Mr. Wright. And I explained to him that I worked for Myron Hunt and Harwell Hamilton Terrace. Oh, he said, Myron was a fine architect. He said, I followed his career, and he was a fine architect. And he said, Harris is one of the leading modernists of America, and certainly that's an experience that's very valuable for you. And he said, and I'm very admiring of Myron. And that's where I made my big mistake. I said, yes, Mr. Wright, he's a grand old man. See that manhole with the cover off right there? Well, I'd have jumped into it. He glared at me. He said, Myron's 2 years younger than I am, and I'm not a grand old man. And he saw my chagrin. And what have I done? I'm with the world master, and I've just insulted him. He patted me on the knee and he said, that's all right. And from that time on, we had marvelous experiences with him. Now, Mrs. Wright, as I tell you, for 2 weeks I sat at her dining table for lunch and dinner for 2 whole weeks. I passed her in the bedroom hall downstairs, and I was like a whiff of smoke. She never acknowledged my presence. She never looked at me. She never smiled. She never acknowledged that I was there. So I told Elizabeth Gordon about this, my boss, who knew everything and did. And I said, this is very creepy. It's really, it was being her guest, and yet being completely ignored. I was not used to that sort of thing. And Elizabeth said to me, well, what was your impression of her the moment you met her? I said, well, she was very cold, and I didn't feel any warmth or any reason to think I wanted to get to know her. There was something there that was wrong for me. And I told her about walking up and down the hall and Mrs. Wright passing me and so forth. And she said, well, she's psychic. And she knew the minute you met her that you didn't like her. Now, she said, she knows I don't like her either. But she has to be nice to me. She doesn't have to be nice to you, and she's not going to be, and don't let it worry you. Well, from then on, here's Mrs. Wright and me just ignoring each other. But that was an interesting experience, and you can read about her a lot in the new book, Joni? The Fellowship. Good book about the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation and the fellowship and the apprentice systems and the background of all these people. There's a lot about Olga Vanna Wright in it, which I'm just reading. But that was a wonderful experience. We returned to New York and rewrote the whole entire issue on Frank Lloyd Wright. And when I was at Taliesin, the photographer who had done the pictures for my house here, the Kunzel House, did all of the pictures for the magazine, or most of them, for that issue. And so I traveled with him a lot, helping him with his pictures, various parts of the country. But you can imagine, or can you, the feelings of a young 35-year-old knowing not much about the world, but having experienced a lot of interesting Westerners, that's the way I put it, through my family. Having the opportunity to travel America, to have entree anywhere I wanted to go in the profession, between interior designers and architects and builders, and go to Europe for the first time. We had 6 weeks of travel in Europe. And coming back to San Diego and La Jolla, refreshed, a hell of a lot smarter, a lot more knowledgeable, and picking up the practice where Roy Drew had kept it. In the meantime, Roy did some very interesting things. He designed Fox Hill, which I understand David Copley is going to tear it all apart. But Roy did all of the work for Jim Copley, the office buildings and the library, 2 libraries really, and Fox Hill and some things in Borrego. Anyway, but to come back in that spirit, believe me, it was a marvelous feeling. I had a whole different view of myself. I felt a lot more confident and felt better, just better for having had that experience.